All right. Well, what the heck, Frank? I say let's jump right in, huh?
All righty, cool.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Karsten, part of the marketing team here at BrainCell, and will be your host for today. Very excited to be discussing Sage Intacct, specifically for the professional services industry. Just to start us off, few housekeeping. Will be about a 45-minute presentation with a Q&A to wrap it all up in the end. So if you have any questions, please place them in the questions box throughout the presentation. I'll be monitoring and asking Frank to answer them at the end. And we'll also be sending out the deck and recording tomorrow morning, so stay tuned for that. You can pass it along to any of your colleagues who were unable to attend today. With that, I'm going to let our man of the hour, Frank Cuccio, introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Frank Cuccio. I'm the ERP account executive here at BrainCell. I focus primarily on Sage Intacct, but I also work with Sage 100, 300, and our new product that we partnered with Acumatica. Stay tuned. In a couple of weeks, we'll have a Intacct versus Acumatica webinar as well. But happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Frank.
Yeah, no problem.
So for those of you who are new here, I just wanted to give a little introduction into what BrainCell is. So BrainCell is a growth enablement company. That means we specialize in providing businesses with consulting services and technology solutions aimed at enhancing organizational performances across their sales, marketing, finance, customer support, pretty much the whole company. So our whole focus is finding the best alignment between four things: people, process, technology, and data. And across these various services, one thing they all have in common is we, BrainCell, are dedicated to being your long-term partner in your success that's backed, and this is backed by our history in the last 30 years. We've been around since 1994. Just a little insight to what we do. As I mentioned, this is going to be about a 45-minute presentation. So what we're going to be talking about today is we'll start off with a few educational slides, diving into what the heck is Sage Intacct and what the 5 proven benefits for growth strategies are with a cloud-based ERP like Sage Intacct. Frank will also be sharing 3 customer success stories from different areas in the professional services space and what they migrated from and how they've been succeeding and growing since switching to Sage Intacct. Then we'll witness a 20-minute demo from our friend Taylor over at Sage, and then, like I said, wrap it up with a Q&A at the end. So again, anytime during the presentation you have a question, please drop them in the question box. I'll be monitoring those. All right, well, let's kick things off with a poll or two polls. So let me just launch the first one.
All right. So most of you are probably on an ERP system now, and usually when you're looking at new options, especially those in the cloud, it's to solve some problems. So please select any that apply to you. Manual processes, lack of visibility into project profitability, that's a huge one for professional services. Remote access, after everyone started working from home, not being able to get into your on-prem systems became a big deal. Multiple entities, not needing to log out and log into more than one company file or QuickBooks company if you're on QuickBooks, and then being able to consolidate that. And if you have no challenges, you can click the last one.
Perfect. All right, thanks everyone for submitting your answers. One last question for you. Launch the second one here.
Yeah, so we're just curious kind of what you're on now. The options are Sage 50, Sage 100 or 300, Microsoft Great Plains, and we'll expand that one to any Microsoft product. If you don't have an ERP system right now, it's number 4, and then other. So maybe QuickBooks, 0.
Perfect. All right, looks like we got all our votes in. Great. Well, thank you all for answering those poll questions. Definitely helps us understand how we can help you overcome some challenges. So with that, let's get started. Frank, the floor is yours.
Cool. Yeah. So the reason we're here today, we want to know what is Sage Intacct. Um, so Sage Intacct's a cloud ERP system, and it benefits many companies in a lot of different ways. As accounting and finance leaders, we're always looking for ways to control costs and lower the total cost of ownership, especially when it comes to software. So with Intacct, what's great is there's no upfront hardware capital costs. Um, and what I mean by that is, if you're on Sage 100 or 300, you may be familiar with the need for a physical server in your office, or even a virtual machine, but having to maintain uh, a server of any kind is a overhead burden. It costs a lot for electricity. Keeping them maintained and up to date is just one more thing that uh, you don't have to do with Intacct because it's in the cloud. Um, Intacct's got no ongoing IT costs. You pay your subscription fee and everything's included in that. And that brings me to point three. So another thing that a lot of on-prem clients deal with or choose not to deal with are their annual upgrades. So every year, these on-prem systems, even if you're hosted in the cloud, they release the newest version of the software. Sage 100, I believe, just came out with their 2024. But in order to get to that, you have to have somebody like BrainCell do the upgrade for you. And it's a process and it takes some hours and there's downtime. But most of all, there's costs. And working through an upgrade, you got to do it in a sandbox and then do it in production. And it's a whole big thing. We got to do it over a weekend. Well, no more. When you're on a cloud system like Intacct, uh, it just gets pushed out. When you're on your phone or you're on Facebook or Instagram and they just push out a new upgrade and everything is brand new, it's kind of the same thing, except a lot less drastic usually. So they're not going to change the algorithm on you. So every quarter they release an upgrade and it happens over a weekend. So you go home Friday, you come in Monday morning, and you just get a little notification on what changed. You can click into the release notes, and usually it's just added functionality or it's an improvement on something existing, and it outlines everything, so it's really straightforward. And again, it costs nothing, and you have to do nothing, so it's pretty great. Um, and then, lastly, Sage Intacct's licensing is pretty predictable. You either have your annual costs, or if you get on a monthly plan for certain things, you know what you're going to pay. There's no surprises. Your server doesn't go down. You're not going to have to pay the emergency support to get everything running because it's end of quarter. You can rely on Sage Intacct, and it's, I think, at 99.9% uptime. So it's pretty substantial. And we kind of went over a little bit of the continuous innovations and the value there about the upgrades, but I was just at Sage's conference in February, and we there's customers, there's partners there, there's ISV solutions, and everybody is sitting there waiting to hear from Sage, what's coming out. And they go through all the cool products that they're rolling into the software, and they're doing a lot of things with AI. And I really have faith that as the years go on, it's just going to even get better and better. So having access to that is great. And then remote access to the data on your phone, tablet, computer, anywhere with an internet connection. You just go into intacct.com, log in, and there you go. And then the last thing, it's a modular system. So you could start with the core package of just your financials. You can start with like the lowest flavor of the projects module. And then as you grow and as your needs kind of evolve, you just decide to bring in additional functionality. Yeah, the subscription goes up, but hopefully as you grow, it's enabling you to get that ROI on your subscription costs. It's making things faster, easier, and you need less people. So those are kind of the main points. um, so yeah, proven growth strategies for professional services. With Sage Intacct, you're going to be able to increase the productivity. Less people focused on busy work and more on strategic work. Because you have multi-entity capabilities, you can consolidate, in hours instead of weeks. Project profitability, being able to see at a glance, budget versus actual, and even being able to add spend management on it, where you could say, here's my budget for a project, and if I go to make a purchase order that is going to put me over budget, I get a notice. It's a function that a lot of people like. We talked about the IT systems. We got APIs for Sage Intacct that can basically connect to any third-party product, either with an existing integration, with an iPaaS integration platform, and middleware to connect them, or we can build a custom integration. And then again, it's scalable, so you're never going to need a new solution down the road.
Perfect.
All right, so we've got 3 customer success stories. We've got Advanced Services, which is a staffing agency down in Nebraska. Aptitude Health is the life sciences company, and then Red Door Interactive is a marketing agency. So we've kind of got a good spread of different types of professional services organizations. So Advanced Services AS Inc., like I said, located in Nebraska. They were a Sage 100 customer of ours. And about a year ago, we were in talks about some of their challenges. They had to sign in and out of 20 different company files. It was taking forever. Reporting, each of those company files had to be exported into Excel. They had to bring in data from their industry-specific staffing software called Aviante, and they had to mash up all the data before they could run any reports. Reports were taking like 3 weeks to run. So an executive would ask the team, hey, get me this report. And by the time they got it, the data was either stale and like outdated, or they didn't even remember why they asked for that report in the first place. It's just too much time was passing in between. They weren't really able to analyze the data based on the criteria they wanted. So in their case, they wanted internal organizational structure, some departments, managers, and marketing areas. So not being able to do that really like stymied their ability to adjust and make changes and focus on where the business needed to be. And their balance sheet was like 8 pages long. They couldn't even consolidate it. So that was before, and now they've been on Sage Intacct for a little bit now. A consolidation, they just log in. They can work on any company from, based on permissions, and they could consolidate. Like they brought it from a month of, like their monthly close was 1 month, and they brought it down to a couple days. Visibility, they're able to see their operational and financial data in Sage Intacct and dashboards, refresh it instantly based on a number of different criterias. And then the dimensions really help with that internal org structure, industry manager, that part. They can break down their profit and loss any way they want, look at projects that way. And they, like I said, they consolidate their financial statements in a day versus a month. It was taking 3 people a month every month. So by the time they finished, they just start again. Oof.
That's a huge time saver for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Aptitude Health. So they're in Atlanta. They were on NetSuite. Boo. Challenges before, they had a failed implementation. Their data was all over the place. Everything was manual. They were manually invoicing. They were tracking their projects in 2 different systems, and their integration was a spreadsheet. So whenever we hear spreadsheet, that's not good, because it's going to introduce risk of just human error. If you fat finger the keyboard, type something in wrong, multiple spreadsheets, like multiple versions, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And they also didn't have multi-currency reporting, so they had to convert their foreign currency exchanges in spreadsheets. So again, not ideal. So they were able to cut invoicing time by 80%. They reduced their close by 30%. They saw a 20% improvement in gross margin and in profits, and they scaled the business 4 times. They were able to reduce DSO by half, and they're able to view everything. And then the multi-entity consolidation, they have multi-currency capability as well now. So it automates all that conversion, and they're able to stay compliant with the new ASC 606, which I know everybody loves. And lastly, we've got Red Door Interactive. So they're out in San Diego. They were on Dynamics. I forget which flavor it was. I think it may have been GP. But their challenges before, time tracking, revenue recognition. Again, we hear these a lot. The disjointed combination of software, no integrations, entering data in 3 different places, manually entering invoices, and they needed a whole team of consultants to help them actually get the job done. So expensive, time-consuming, manual. And then with Intacct, they were saving 55 hours a month just on workflows and reporting, and 1 to 2 days for reporting expenses. I know in Dynamics, the reporting is just pretty terrible. Most people have to export it into Access or into Excel. Now in Intacct, they're able to filter and drill down into all their data. And they were able to scale without adding headcount. But the biggest one I like is that last point. The software paid for itself in 9 months, and that's pretty good. But pretty much, at least everyone I've talked to, when they go to Intacct, they get ROIs in this neighborhood. Sometimes it's even quicker. Sometimes it's a year and a half, but there is an ROI. And talking to your account manager, your account executive, our role is to help you build that out. We want to build out the case, and we want to use real numbers.
Great. Thank you, Frank. Lots of good themes: time saving, ditching the spreadsheets, which we love to see, and company growth. Fantastic. All right. Let's get everyone a demo of Sage Intacct, shall we?
Sounds good to me. Pass it off to Taylor.
All right, y'all, let's jump into the product tour for Sage Intacct for services organizations. So a couple things to note before we dive into a project record. Sage Intacct is a role-based solution. Depending on your role, you have permission to access different workflows, transaction records, reports. These can be leveraged and accessed through the drop-down menu, through your favorites, through bookmarks, or through some Google-like functionality that we call the global search. So easy to come in, edit, make adjustments to transactions, to update information, to track insights, as long as you have permission to do so. We're going to go through a plethora of dashboards today. Dashboards are configurable. They're easily shareable with outside users. You can also clone pre-configured dashboards, create your own, or come in and make adjustments to dashboards that are delivered to you after your implementation process. So point and click, drag and drop. I would like to preface, everything in the system is at point and click, drag and drop. You'll hear during the sales cycle us reference our solution as an accounting system made by accountants for accountants. And all that really means is we like to keep things simple. We want you to focus on managing your business from a back office perspective so you can actually help the front office to make data-driven decisions. And we do that by keeping the platform simple and easy to use while tracking data in a seamless and efficient fashion that you then get from a reporting perspective to share with key stakeholders. All right, so let's jump in first to a project record. We'll talk about the inception of projects out of the tool. So projects can be created by adding projects from scratch. They can be created by going into a template, editing that template, and then duplicating it as a starting point. They can be created by pulling in project-based information via CSV, or they can originate in an outside platform, such as a CRM or a PSA tool. So a few different ways I can get projects into Sage Intacct. I've already created projects for us today. So we're going to dig into 2 different records, and then we'll see some of the information and insights you can keep track of. So on these project records, you are storing information such as the project name. We have that unique identifier that's going to tie that project again to outside tools like our CRM. It also allows us to easily search for a project within Sage Intacct. My projects can have additional fields or selections made, such as categorizations and project types, which can provide me with additional context and detail. I associate this to a customer, add in my beginning and end date, and then I have that project status to help restrict certain transactions from being booked against this project if it is not necessarily in progress, maybe on hold or still in that opportunity phase. We also can, of course, tie a project manager directly to this record. And in my additional info tab, I'm keeping track of how much time we've actually worked against this project, or how much we've completed, I should say, since this is a fixed fee project. I can track information such as the billing type. So here we have fixed fee, time and materials, fixed fee and expense, as well as things like favorable terms that are being offered to these customers, the currency being leveraged if we're a multi-entity organization, and as well as additional documents, so MSAs, SOWs that need to be tracked against this record. We're going to start doing our dimensional tagging, which is going to then flow onto the AR invoice, onto the AP invoice, onto timesheets, onto employee expenses, so I don't have to keep rekeying in information. And then I'm also going to make sure I staff these projects correctly, which we'll talk about in a moment when we dive deeper into time and expense. Our project summary provides context and clues in terms of our revenue, what's been deferred, what's been billed, what costs we have tied to this engagement. I'm storing budgeted billing amounts, budgeted costs, and budgeted durations, understanding the efficiency of my engagement down to the hours, whether those are non-billable, since again, this is a fixed fee project, or whether I have cost actually tied to this engagement as well. So I'm starting to get some great color and detail. I also have access to Gantt charts as well that I can leverage in the system, and I can access those from my list view or directly from my project records. I can set up controls around invoicing, issuing warnings, preventing billings if we exceed certain budgeted amounts. And then of course I can set up tasks tied to the project, task dependencies, and then keep track of whether these tasks are milestone based, whether we are actually observing percentage of completion at the task level, and even tying resources directly to tasks within the system. So easy again for me to manage my projects, setting up these project records in the system. And as a project manager, I can always come into the tool, track this information, getting good detail and context from my dashboard views, getting information and insights on things like hours worked, labor costs, total costs, revenue, gross profits, actuals versus budgets, all the way down to that task level. And I can leverage my dimensions, such as my customer dimension, looking at regional information to filter that detail, to dive down deep into the information and drive that decision-making process. So simple and easy again for me to create these project records. These project records are going to drive my invoicing to that end customer, and it also is a means of tracking any sort of project cost against a specific engagement. And it's its own dimension, so I could always go into the system and actually filter directly by those projects themselves. All right, so we just walked through projects. Projects are easy to create in the system. And now we're going to talk about the insights that I can track against projects in more depth. So getting into project costing, I want to understand my time. I want to understand my employee expenses. I want to understand my pass-through costs, and I'll be able to do that all on my project record. We're going to actually leverage some artificial intelligence to actually track time effectively and efficiently. And then we'll get into reporting after we walk through our billing process. Again, any system we're integrating with that is involved in your workflow for your service organization can be integrated with Sage Intacct as long as they have open APIs. And if you want more information on that, I encourage you to reach out to our team. So let's jump back into the tool and actually walk through time and expense. All right, so now we're going to look at a different type of a project record. That project record is going to be a time and expense project, and that is going to help us take a deeper dive into how we track time and expense against our engagements. So we'll go back to our project list view here. So this project, similar feel, similar vibe, and I'm able to get into my additional info though and see that this is time and materials, and I've checked off my billable employee expenses and my billable AP and PO transactions. On this project summary, you can actually see that I have some actual billings, I have some billable hours, as well as some billable expenses that have been passed through to that end customer. So a lot of great detail that's on this project page. This has some additional information that's being tracked because now we're billing hours and we're billing expenses. Time is easy to invoice on in Sage Intacct. It's also easy to track against engagements from a costing perspective. We're going to do this with artificial intelligence. This is getting into Sage Intacct, consistently looking for ways to create a smart GL. Our AI functionality helps our resources actually determine exactly how much time they need to track on a weekly basis. We are going to be leveraging AI, connecting to a time assistant, to your calendar, to your email, to say, how long have I spent on this event, on this task, in this tool? And is that associated to a project? And if it is, the system is going to create an activity card. You'll be able to drag and drop that insight and then make sure that you submit your timesheet effectively and efficiently, which is going to alleviate up to $10,000 in revenue leakage that businesses are seeing on a regular basis due to inaccurate time tracking. This is also a mobile application, though I'm going to demo it in the desktop today. So here we have Sage Intelligent Times. Again, it's utilizing AI to create these activity cards with a time assistant by connecting to a calendar, by connecting to your email. The employee or the resource controls this data. So this isn't a big brother tool, it's an efficiency tool. So you are able to determine what data sources you connect to from an AI perspective. You don't have to connect to any. You also can just leverage manual time entry, adding in rows in the historical way. Or you can take these activity cards, which are going to pre-populate your dimensional tagging as it gets smarter over time, and then drag and drop that context and detail to create time entries in the system. An approver can also approve time entries now directly from their mobile app, leveraging Sage Intelligent Time. This is syncing automatically with Sage Intacct, which allows you then to seamlessly submit your timesheets efficiently and effectively at the appropriate time to help alleviate that revenue leakage that we were seeing. You can also track time and expenses within Sage Intacct. So I could actually come into the system and create expense reports directly within the tool. I can always view these expense reports if I am an approver. I can approve them if I'm an approver, of course, as well. And I can see things like the meal type or the expense type in this case. I can attach receipts. I'm going to tag that project ID. And if it's a billable expense, I'm going to tag that so then we can pass through that end cost. So again, nice and easy for me to manage these engagements, tracking employee expenses, tracking time against these engagements, as well as creating AP transactions, so vendor bills or POs, and then marking those as billable as well, and then passing through those end costs to our customer if it's a billable transaction. So now we'll actually jump into the system and do that. So it's easy for me to bill for either that percentage of completion that we saw in that project record, that employee expense that we just took a look at, the time that's been booked against this engagement, or any sort of subcontractor expenses that we're passing through by leveraging my generate invoice page here. This is going to allow me to search by customer, by project, and very easily find what is available for me to actually invoice on. In this case, I looked for Nirvana, my customer as a whole, because I have 2 projects that I want to invoice on. And now I can see I have some time entries. I can select all the time entries to invoice on. I'm just going to select a few here. I have some employee expenses I can invoice on as well. And I can also invoice on my subcontractor expense here. And if I have questions on the expense that I'm invoicing on, I can always get down into that transaction record and see right here that's a subcontractor expense for $1,500, and that looks good to go for me. Once I actually decide that I am comfortable with what we're invoicing on, as well as you can see here, this fixed fee project, I'm invoicing on 10% because we had 10% percentage of completion, I can go in and actually create my invoice. Once I create my invoice, I'll look at my invoice run, and I can easily see the PDF that was created out of the system, and you can have these created in summary or detailed views, and then share those with your end customer. Because this process is so seamless, now we are decreasing our DSO. So we're getting these invoice transactions to our customers effectively and efficiently. They're able to pay us quickly, so we can lower the aging that we're seeing from an AR perspective and then get that cash back to the business to use to reinvest. And here you can see I have my project fees, I have my billable expenses. It even tells me it's a meal. And I can see my subcontractor expense. All the way down here, it tells me my total. And these are flexible templates. Again, you can add labels, you can add different formats, you can even create different views for different customers, all because Sage Intacct's flexible, it's efficient. Again, that accounting tool made for accountants by accountants, allowing you to easily come in, track your data in detail directly in the system. So just to reemphasize, Sage Intacct has 2 million projects being run on the platform today. We are helping customers like the ones that you see here on the right side of the page increase their efficiency, so increase revenue, increase your profit margins, increase your billable utilization, so the effectiveness and the efficiency of your employees, as well as making sure that we are invoicing accurately, increasing our time cycles, and making sure that our gross margins are increasing as well. I also want to note that in terms of these projects, it was really easy for me to determine which employees to actually staff on these engagements with my resource management functionality. So I did want to touch on that before we move forward. So I'm actually able to go into my project records and actually determine which resources we want to leverage. I can keep placeholders on these project records. So I could come in, store a consultant here as a placeholder. And then when I'm ready to actually find a consultant to work against this engagement, I can look by that employee group, look by a specific entity, search for specific skill sets, and then see what employees actually fit that criteria, and then staff them on this engagement. So Chuck's already a part of this process, so I don't need to restaff him, but I could have easily selected him, added him to the project, and then continued forward. So I actually don't need this placeholder. I even get resource capacity, insights, and information, seeing who's overbooked, who's out of office, if we're over budget. And then this allows me to actually start tracking utilization information. So it's easy for my resource manager to understand what we need to do from a staffing perspective. So here you're seeing I have utilization detail by title, by quarter, by employee. You've seen that I also have some project-based insights and information, looking at information like project financials. I have the ability to drill in all the way to the transaction level. So anytime I see blue numbers, blue words, that's a drillable field, that's a drillable area. So I can always understand the story behind my data in detail. So now I can easily understand how many active projects do I have in a specific location by a specific project manager. I could filter that data in detail, see the KPIs tied to that, see utilization trends, move into my project manager dashboard to get more color in detail, seeing insights like hours worked, labor's costs, other expenses, and then start getting into my actual versus budget detail, doing my insights by fixed fee analyses as well as by task, and then make sure that I'm also staffing and approving timesheets at the appropriate time, all while leveraging my dimensions to segment my data and information. So a lot of great detail here. Allows me to seamlessly track my transactional information, manage my projects efficiently and effectively, while also making sure that I'm getting the reporting that I need to understand my business, to seek out additional funding, or to make sure that we're growing and expanding at an appropriate rate. This is a great transition into project-based reporting. So I just walked through these different dashboard views. You got to see that I have project reporting that is coming out of the box that can be applied directly to my dashboard. So all those reports we just clicked through were out of the box reports directly able to be utilized within the system. I'm also going to walk through some of our advanced reporting as well as our planning tool as well, because if you actually expand out into advanced reporting, leveraging what we call the Interactive Visual Explorer or the Interactive Custom Report Writer, you actually extend out your library of project-based reports. For example, with ICRW now, I can get into project cost forecasting, seeing what my costs are going to look like by project in the future. I could have even had this as a quick tag where I could actually drill down to that project record as need be. I could do the same thing for revenue, forecasting out what that will look like on a project by project basis. And then I have the ability to actually go in and leverage the Interactive Visual Explorer to analyze my projects, go into meetings with the head of ops, have great conversations about the status of my engagements, utilize these attributes, drag and drop, adjust my X and Y axis, and then utilize the narrate functionality to create PowerPoints, images, and visuals to share out with key stakeholders. All of these reports out of the box or advanced reporting can also be added to dashboard views. So this is really moving us out of Excel, moving us just out of dimensional analysis to really diving deep into our trends, analyzing those transactions with ICRW, viewing the trends with IVE, and then sharing the information out with key stakeholders, leveraging IVE as well. I also like to preface that on top of the forecasting reports around cost and revenue, you can leverage our advanced planning tool to plan for the future, actually getting into our project planning dashboard here, looking at revenue per employee, commission services for our service organizations, labor costs by employees, project profits, or travel expenses by employee type. You can get into your different models that have been created to actually start seeing bookings by services or service revenue. You can see this by fixed fee. You can look at it by time and materials, managed services that you have, understanding your total bookings, getting into profit or your gross profit margin. We also can track our expenses, labor costs, travel expenses, and commission services very easily as well. And these models can also come out of the box on day one. So I can get into my model library and actually get in and add this travel expense model as a starting point. In my working budget, I can actually tie these models directly to a budget line. So here you can see there's that model we just took a look at for bookings tied directly to my revenue services line here. So when I go into my sheets and I want to start viewing my information, I can see the P&L impact. I can see the cash impact directly in the system. I can track my bookings, track my headcount detail and information, and then view a nice summary view to be shared out to an end user, as well as leveraging interactive assumptions to see how changing my number of reps impacts commissions or any other widget, just leveraging my SIP dashboards. So we are providing you with an amazing ecosystem for your project-based business, allowing you to do project costing seamlessly, track your revenue, make sure you're understanding who's staffed on your engagements, understand from an AI perspective what that time entry looks like, track those employee expenses or connect to a best-in-class tool, and then analyze those projects with out-of-the-box reporting, advanced reporting, or a Sage Intacct planning tool that you can always get as a part of your Sage ecosystem. Again, we have AI also built into this workflow, reestablishing the fact that we are dedicated to creating what we call an intelligent GL. All right, so we'll finish out by just talking about the fact that now that I've tracked my transactions seamlessly, I'm getting better reporting, I want to make sure that my close process is effective and efficient so I can use that reporting to drive data-driven decision making. And we're going to be able to seamlessly do that in Sage Intacct as well. So if I come into Intacct, go to my controller dashboard, I'll be able to come in and easily leverage my close checklist. My close checklists are going to help make sure that I am staying on task as I manage my close process. I can change assignment names, update and adjust tasks, set dependencies, and assign different users. This is a flexible checklist, so it does not have to be the same every single month, every single quarter. I can make adjustments and even restrict users from making certain changes. I can leverage my collaborate functionality here, which is on not only checklists, but transaction records and reports to tag Sage Intacct users or even Salesforce users if I'm integrated to that platform, and they'll get notifications on that in their Collaborate Center or via email. So nice and easy now for me to manage my close process with checklists. The majority of my journal entries are being auto-created with those AR and those AP transactions, and then any additional journal entries I can create one-off, recurring entries, or statistical entries as well. I also can easily manage my bank rec process. This is connecting to up to 10,000 plus banks out of the box. So your bank feed is getting updated on a daily basis. You can do soft reconciliations, making sure we're managing our cash effectively. If I'm a global organization, I can easily set up a multi-entity structure. I can automate that consolidation process, eliminating those intercode transactions at the appropriate time, whether that's daily, weekly, or monthly, and then track my transactional data for that additional entity and the correct base currency like we're doing for the UK here. So we're able to really help organizations manage their business on a global scale. We're automating your processes to make sure you have an effective and efficient close. As we've proven, we have the functionality to make sure you're managing your services organization effectively and efficiently, whether that's US based or a global organization. We work with companies across the globe, making sure that we are effectively and efficiently helping them to grow, that we are making sure they're maintaining compliance, whether that is GAAP or IFRS, as well as making sure that we are the right partner to enable organizations to be successful going forward.
All right. Well, thanks, Taylor. That was a ton of great information. I think next, Frank, we're going to hop into some Q&A.
Sounds good.
All right. We actually do have a few questions. So the first one here is, what is the migration process like and how much time does it take?
It's the best answer I can always give. It depends. So I'll kind of go into the factors. So what's going to factor into it is the biggest thing is your availability. For Sage Intacct project, there is a commitment from our clients, especially in the beginning of the project. We need to be able to sit down with you and do some very detailed requirements gathering. So we're going to need somebody on your side that's going to run point as the project champion, and we're going to need to be interviewing some of the subject matter experts so that we can design your system, so that you can get all the returns that we're promising you. So a little bit higher effort in the beginning, then it kind of trails off while we actually build out the system. And then it picks up a little bit as we get into training and testing. And then obviously when we hand it off to you. So it's not like a tremendous amount of effort, but we need to set some time aside to do what we need to do. But other than that, it's going to depend on how many modules you put in, like a core. If you just do core financials and maybe one of the flavors of the project module, maybe you're looking at 4 months, give or take. You add inventory and you start adding in some of the other modules, it's going to go up from there. But we can go faster, but it usually just depends on you guys.
Great. Thanks, Frank. That was a good answer. Obviously, no true time we can give, but giving the best effort, do it once and do it right.
Right.
All right. Our second question here is, are you able to budget and track profitability by project or services type? I think we saw that a little bit.
So I think Taylor went into that a bit, but just to kind of recap it, each project, you can do it on a project by project basis. So I want to look at project A, budget versus actuals. Yeah, I can do that. If I want to look at just projects, so let's say you're, what kind of company are you? Say you're a marketing agency and we want to look at just digital marketing. We could do all the projects that are, that type of service. We can do a subsect of them based on location. Any of those dimensions we talked about, you could filter and you could track the profitability of any of these groups of projects or services. So yeah, short answer is yes.
Awesome. And are you able to make customer invoices unique based on their required format?
Yes. And I know some of our competitors, NetSuite, can't do this. We can, just a configuration that we need to do in the beginning. And we'll show you how to do it so that if you do have needs that change, you can probably do it on your own, but you're able to make customer facing invoices the way they want to see them.
Great, that's huge for a handful of people. And then it looks like this is our last question, but how do I get my employees' billable time from my payroll software into projects they worked?
Got it. So again, it's going to depend on the software, but in general, the process kind of works like this. If there is a direct integration, likely in the payroll software, there is, I don't know what they'll call it. Some will call it projects, some will call it jobs. There's some way that they're indicating what hours they worked when they log their time. And then we would use the integration to map those hours to the projects within Sage Intacct. You would need the time and expenses module for that in order to make them talk to each other, but it's not a problem. Yeah, and if there is no integration, then it may be a CSV file import where maybe there's a column header on the CSV that says projects or job. We just then map that to Intacct as well.
Awesome. Looks like that's all the questions that came in, but if anyone has more after the webinar, you can always reach out to us. And to wrap it up here, as a reminder, I will be sending the recording and deck tomorrow morning, and we'll be following up with everybody. We are offering an ERP optimization audit, which is huge with our friend Frank here, but it's a great opportunity that includes reviewing of your current tech stack and processes, to really understand where those challenges are and where there's room for improvement, and then identify any opportunities where it can leverage data in automation. Oof, can't speak after that. And then lastly, document any next steps, whether it be personal demo, just kind of depending how your conversation goes and what the appropriate next steps are to make sure that we can help you along your growth journey.
Yeah, so happy to help with that. Just to recap, let's identify those challenges and see, is it worth fixing it? And then that's how we come up with the ROI. So we could figure out, does this software make sense? And 9 times out of 10, I think it will. So let's have a chat.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all again for joining us, and thank you, Frank, for your insight in answering those questions. Again, feel free to reach out to us anytime. Our contact information is here. We'll be following up with everybody tomorrow. So thank you all.
All right, have a good one.